Why must I always be wrong in my predictions? Whatever. At least I get to look back at just how wrong I was. First off, the vast majority of my playoff predictions, the people the teams that actually would make the playoffs, I guessed correctly. So I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. However, um, yeah, I was pretty right coming into it until we reached the conference finals. But let's just not talk about this, okay? This is going to be a postmortem of the 2018 NBA playoffs. If you do not like that name, feel free to contact me at 1-800-GO-FUCK-YOURSELF. First in the news, we have the Houston Rockets and Minnesota Timberwolves. For a good while, I thought the Rockets were going to sweep them, but lo and behold, Minnesota won a playoff game. At home court, nonetheless. However, they were still beaten soundly in 5 games by the Rockets, and sanity was restored into the NBA. Because, quite frankly, everyone had Minnesota getting swept. Let's see. Toronto versus Washington. Again, I had a sweep here. I figured that the Raptors were a much better squad than they were last year, and Washington had been trying to recover after John Wall's 8-week injury. Yeah, it was a long time. So I would have figured that Washington just would have just gotten swept under the rug, tough shit, come back next year better. However, I was wrong again, and once Toronto went 3-up in the series, Washington snuck 2 games out on them before Toronto took game 6 at Washington. So, hooray! Another very predictable playoff outcome. Next up, the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Utah Jazz. To be perfectly honest with you, I thought the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to win in 5 games. Because I figured, you know what? Paul George is an excellent playoff player. And Russell Westbrook finally has this roster that he's been needing since last year. Surely this year's different. Nope. I should have seen it when they won 1 more playoff game than they did last year, but I was fucking blind. Oh, and for those of you who don't know, I am a Thunder fan, so this is really close to heart. The fact that Donovan Mitchell, a goddamn rookie, made Oklahoma City, a team filled with veterans, look like they're bitches is beyond embarrassing. So I'm just going to leave it at this. OKC, blow it up. Utah, congratulations. Next up is Cleveland versus Indiana. This was probably the best series of the entire NBA Finals. And by finals, I mean playoffs. Because nobody thought that Indiana would put up so much as a fight, yet they went the distance against LeBron James. And if it weren't for J.R. Smith making a bullshit full court 3 in Game 7, I'm pretty sure the Pacers would have pulled this out. It is unbelievable how well the Pacers played throughout this series, and the fact that one of these teams had to lose was depressing. And the fact that LeBron James just ended up winning anyways really makes you question, what's the point of retooling your roster if the best players in the league are just going to teabag you repeatedly? But that is another question for another day, isn't it? Next up, Portland versus New Orleans. Honestly, I thought Portland was going to win in 7 games. But, oh, boy, were we all wrong. New Orleans swept Portland. And to think that I actually gave credit to Damian Lillard. Because, he's underrated. He's so overlooked. Yeah, well, if that were the case, you wouldn't get fucking swept in the playoffs twice in a row. Maybe next time, show up with your game instead of your mouth, and maybe people will actually take you seriously. Next up, Philadelphia versus Miami. Honestly, this is the one series that I saw going as it went. I figured Philadelphia was going to blow them up with talent, and lo and behold, They did. This was a very physical series that I enjoyed very much, and it's kind of sad that it only lasted 5 games because, oh man, how fun would a Philly versus Miami series have been if it went to 7 games? That would be something worth putting asses in seats, don't you think? Next up, Golden State versus San Antonio. Okay, maybe I was lying. I figured that this series would go as it did. Don't get me wrong, I never underestimate Coach Popovich and all, but it's Golden State. And we saw what happened to San Antonio without Kawhi Leonard last year. Why would it be any different this year? I'm glad that San Antonio won a game and they didn't end up getting swept, but man, was that just depressing to watch, especially Erin Popovich, which is Coach Popovich's wife, ended up dying during the series. That's just heartbreaking, and I wish Coach Popovich nothing but the best, and hopefully he can return to coaching. If not, we all understand, man. Boston versus Milwaukee. I had this one going 5 in Boston's favor. And get this, I am not a Celtics fan. I am not a Red Sox fan. I fucking hate the Patriots. And the only reason why I root for the Boston Bruins is because Kansas City, my hometown, does not have a hockey franchise, and they haven't had one since, 1976. So yeah, that's why. So, keep that non-biased opinion in mind, okay? I had Boston winning in 5 because I know that Coach Brad Stevens is a monster, and Milwaukee has been hectic. They've been hectic. They fired Jason Kidd, and several of their roster pieces were getting small injuries that were dragging them down towards the end of the season. I figured, you know what, Boston's going to gas them. Yeah, they're both dealing with injuries, but Boston is still a great team even without their best players. Meanwhile, Milwaukee isn't very good when their best players are out. That was my rationale, and I thought, okay, yeah, that's fine. I know Boston's got this under the rug. Oh boy, what the fuck was I wrong? This went to 7 games. And I don't even know why it went to 7 games. I'd have figured Boston had their heads in the game and they'd win it in 5, but no, they won in 7. Granted, they still won the series, so I'll give them that. But why did it take you 7 games? All they have is Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he's one man. Everyone else is either a good role player or just average. I don't know. Anyways, second round. Next up we have Houston versus Utah. And it went as expected. I figured that Houston would just absolutely steamroll a young and a team with hardly any direction in the Jazz, and they did. Figures. Now, Chris Paul can enjoy a conference finals appearance for the first time in his very, very long career. He is truly the Alex Ovechkin of basketball. Next up, Toronto versus Cleveland. Big fucking surprise. Toronto always does this in the playoffs. They start out in the regular season looking like they're going to sweep everyone into an NBA Finals appearance. Then they pull this shit. Yet again, LeBron James acted like Toronto was just some sort of warm-up. Holy shit. You got embarrassingly swept under the rug. Yeah, I think it's safe to say now that LeBron James owns Toronto, okay? Toronto shall be renamed LeBronto, because there is no way in hell that Dwayne Casey deserved to get fired. There is equally no way in hell that he deserved to win Coach of the Year, especially when Brad Stevens didn't get a single vote. That is bullshit and everyone knows it. Let's see. Next up is New Orleans versus Golden State. And I know what people are going to say. It should have been closer, but think about it. New Orleans has minimal playoff experience, and the pieces that they did have, were only here since the beginning of the season. So once they come back stronger than before, I'm sure they'll get their shit together. And hell, they may even make a conference appearance against the Warriors if they can beat Houston. Next up is Boston versus Philly. Go figure. Two of the most cancerous fan bases in all of North American sports going at it. And Boston embarrassingly took them out in 5 games. It honestly looked like it was going to be a sweep, but then Joel Embiid decided to act like he was important. And believe it or not, I actually do like him. He was a Kansas Jayhawk. I watched him when he was in college, and he's a really good player. I like what I'm seeing out of him. And it'll be fun to see what Philly and Boston can do against each other, because those look to be the next 2 big names in the future. The conference finals, we have Houston versus Golden State and Cleveland versus Boston. In Houston versus Golden State, this series went to 7 games, and I don't think anyone is surprised because of that. Both teams were extremely talented. Everyone predicted both of these teams to just steamroll their way into the playoffs. Both of them did. And the series was amazing up until Game 6. Chris Paul, yet again, got injured in the playoffs in the worst time, too. And Golden State capitalized in both Game 6 and 7. That has got to be the toughest way to end your season. Especially when you miss 27 straight three-pointers at home in a Game 7 for a chance to go to the NBA Finals. Which would be the first time you've done that since 1995. Ouch. And then on the other hand, there's Boston versus Cleveland. Had Boston been healthy, they would have won this series. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that they had a 3-2 series lead and blew it. Did Bruce Boudreau visit the Celtics? That is the only way to explain that level of choking. If you don't know what I mean, subscribe to Urinating Tree and watch Bruce Boudreau's Legacy of Failure. That guy has lost more home Game 7s and blown more 3-2 series leads than how many dumps I've taken this week. And no, I do not have a short, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about. Bowel movement. Yeah, there we go. And then in the NBA Finals, it's yet again the Warriors versus the Cavs. God damn it. The fact that the Warriors swept the Cavs is already reason enough to show that you can't win in this league alone when you have a $100 million salary cap and allowing super teams to stay for extremely long amounts of time is why I want to see the NBA just go into a lockout. And what I mean by a lockout is that the NBA season is postponed up until maybe December 25th, and they get stricter rules on the salary cap, so teams can no longer form these unbeatable rosters that keep winning championships again and again and again. That's not good for business, and it's not fun to watch. Fuck this league up the ass with a dildo so big it puts Broncos to shame.